Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to another week of the Lucas and Zack podcast. I am here once again, and so is Zach Ford. How are you doing, Zach?
I'm doing great. That's the most upbeat hello I've had in air things. Even though before we started taping, I was like, yeah, we're gonna do the show. We started tape. I'm doing great, baby.
And guess what? We are in a new month, so that means Tom Hanks is gone, like literally gone. We've erased him from
Forever.
history. He never
People are
existed.
gonna blame us for killing Tom Hanks.
It's a really weird movie watching Toy Story now because it's just all about Tim Allen and it ages terribly. But we are here to talk about animated Halloween movies. But first, let's do our traditional intro, which is to talk about the last movie we logged on Letterboxd. Zach Ford, last movie you
Yes,
logged on
we.
Letterboxd.
Last movie I logged was Feels Good Man. Feels Good Man documentary about Pepe the Frog. Innocent comic about post college maildom to becoming a meme and then representing a lot of horrible horrible things. This is I think I go into watching this movie already with too cynical mindset for internet that was bound to just super depress me. I'm already kind of on like the internet should burn is my point of view for the most part, even though we are actively taping something for the internet. So there's hypocrisy there. Um, but I think the way it exhibits how the internet can be a dark hole to ruin all of culture and give so much power to the trolliest of trolls hiding in the shadows. It gives too much power to the anonymous. And I mean, it goes into how it's like affected the political landscape as well, and it's all terrifying and depressing. And it has depressed me more than any movie this year. So that's it. Watch it if you want to, have an idea on how the internet is the shithole we all know it is.
Yeah, so I only know Pepe the Frog as this bizarre, like, alt-right symbol. And
Yeah.
I do think this documentary would be really interesting because it doesn't make a lot of sense why it's an alt-right symbol because it seems somewhat innocuous of a frog
So
that just has become turned into this really vile engine of hate and you know bad
because it
acting.
was really taken as a symbol of like depression by 4chan. If anything, this documentary is about it's really about 4chan
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of culture and how
You
that
know,
culture has
the wonderful place that
impacted
is 4chan.
how that culture has impacted the internet landscape as a whole. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's just it evolved on there from something that was just encapsulating how they feel to where they started to equate to offensive shit because other people were trying to appropriate it. And so they had to take it back by saying, look, now it's racist, so you can't like it. So it's 4chan being 4chan is how Pepe became a all right icon. And Trump's
So
best friend, Pepe.
absolutely, Vice President Pepe the Frog. So the last movie I watched was a rewatch of Observe and Report, which is the Seth Rogen mall cop comedy question mark because it's sort of a comedy, but it's sort of not. And I think that I like this a lot more in rewatch, although I do think it is kind of a weird commentary on like the problematic nature of not making our police force be held to certain standards because there's like several crimes committed by mall security and cops and like nothing really happens to them, so it's kind of weird in hindsight.
But you're not supposed to like think they're doing great. Like you're like, look at this shitty thing that people with too much power can do.
Potentially, but Seth Rogen is
Oh,
sort of also
okay.
treated like the hero, which is kind of a weird contrast. This also came out in the same year as Paul Blart Mall Cop, the Kevin James movie, and I think they really got kind of mixed together. But if you on a rewatch, oh my god, these are different movies. Like Seth Rogen is, I think, trying to say a lot more, and it's a lot less goofy at times, and also just
Wait,
a lot darker.
you're trying to say that a Seth Rogen movie has more intelligence to it than a Kevin James movie? How dare you? Shocking.
I have watched
Shocking and
I
racist.
have watched every single episode of The King of Queens, but only because I wanted to watch Jerry Still.
Have you
Um,
watched every Kevin James movie? Zookeeper. Boom. What's
Here goes the
goes the
boom.
boom?
No, that's a terrible anime movie. But yes, Observe and Report, interesting on rewatch, but also somewhat problematic, especially considering watching it in 2020 and it was made in 2009. But with that, let us continue on to our discussion of our main film of the evening, which is, of course, Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. And we always start off our main segment with America's favorite segment, which is, of course, the Zack Ford plot summary. Hit it, Zack.
Right? I feel like our biggest fan base is in Australia, so Australia's biggest famous segment.
The
So
data does not actually tell us that Australia is the biggest fan base, but
I'm
Australia, you're
glad
pulling third.
you're giving me a little bit of a pause there because I was about to start recounting the plot feels good man again because I was looking at the poster of the frog so okay. Wallace and Gromit, Curse of the Rare Rabbit. Wallace and Gromit, you all know them. They're buds. They're our buds. Great people. They are like pest control.
Mhm.
Uh, Going around mostly getting bunnies because they're in a town that's obsessed with their like vegetable contest and having the largest pumpkin in town. Everybody does it. The priest does it. The whole town's all about it except for Wallace because he hates vegetables. He only likes cheese. Gromit, is trying to get him on a nice diet. Um, so they capture a bunch of rabbits from a lady that Wallace has his eyes on, and they hey they try to do something with the bunnies to like hold them all, and then something like goes kaboom, and
Mhm.
later there's all of a sudden there's a giant rabbit eating all the vegetables. You think it's going to eat the people, but no, nah, this is a kids movie. Their big problem is that it just wants to eat all the vegetables. That is the conflict of the movie. There's a giant rabbit eating all the farm goods, and it needs to be solved. And it turns out, we spoilers. This is
Yes,
don't
yes,
watch
you've
the
seen it.
podcast. You don't know what this is. It was Wallace all along. There's a great moment of him transforming into the rabbit. For some reason, he gets stuck with the rabbit ears for a while. I don't really know why he stopped in transformation. They don't really explain it, but it's funny to look at his model with rabbit ears. Um, Somehow they solve this. I don't even remember. Somehow they get him to not turn into a rabbit anymore. I know there's like a big female rabbit robot that they use, which is like super Looney Tunesy, and that's like an hour before what I'm talking about now. That's when to bring that back up. There's a guy that loves hunting animals that's trying to kill Were Rabbit Wallace, and that was the boyfriend of the woman that Wallace loves. No, not loves. This is early in the relationship. Has a crush on. Dude, squeaky door, sexy. And
All right, wrap it up,
why,
Zack.
why they in a relationship, those two, I don't know. That guy's not cool. But he tries to kill Wallace, and instead, something happens there. The end.
Okay, that's pretty good. Forgot the mind manipulation part. That was an important part of it.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, they put the orb on his head, and that's how he became the rabbit. Is they swapped him and the rabbit,
Oh, it's mind manip. Okay, sure.
and then they get the one of the funnier jokes is they have a rabbit who acts exactly like
Yes,
Wallace,
that's it. Yes, yeah.
which is very funny. But let us continue to our main discussion, and I know you wanted to start with a discussion of the studio that is behind Wallace and Gromit, which is of course Aardman Animations. So Aardman Animations produced stuff like Chicken Run, this movie, Flushed Away, Arthur Christmas, Shaun the Sheep movie, Early Man, and then the second Shaun the Sheep movie. And then they've also done like TV shows, which are
You skipped
kind of
pirates. There's pirates.
yes, Pirates. Yes, we could do Pirates.
I don't know what the rest of it's called, but it's just called pirates, right?
In an adventure with scientists is what the Wikipedia page tells me. But they also started as, of course, like a TV show, and Wallace and Gromit were like short films. That's I think where they got their start. Um, and they're known because they do claymation. It's kind of the style they do in all their work. And what do you think about Aardman as a studio? How do you feel about them?
Yeah, so I want to compare some of the studios, especially as we do some of the other stop motion stuff, because their animation is very specific. I think the clay, especially, is what makes it interesting because it's kind of crude, their style,
Mm-hmm.
especially the Nick Park stuff, the Wallace and Gromit, the Shaun the Sheep, compared to some of the others. They're especially cruder. Like you can see fingerprints on their faces sometimes, some smudges and stuff. I Which I think adds some charm. Everything looks like handcrafted.
Mm-hmm.
You never really believe that this is like a real world. It has a sense of like warmth and nostalgia because it just looks like something you could have made as a child, and it makes you feel like you're playing make believe in a way. It's like you're playing with dolls. I said compared to other animation that tries to be a little more real, make you forget you're in an anime world. I feel like Aardman does the opposite. Aardman it like knows that this is like make believe, and it makes you feel like you're playing with clay as a preschooler, and I find that really endearing and charming.
Yeah, it's very charming. Yeah, that's I think the word I would use as well. Is just um, they want you to see the effort. I think they really like you
Mhm.
noticing what they've been doing. A lot of animation is about like
Hiding effort.
making you forget that there is effort. Like something like a Pixar is like they're going to do something really complicated, but they don't ever want you to see that there was effort put into it. And Aardman is really into like um, this is like a really high level version of what you yourself could do with a
Yeah,
camera and some clay. And I think they've just perfected it so well. I don't think anyone could do it on their level. They just have like, and they also really take advantage of it. They don't try to make the characters look like people. They let them look like clay figures. And I think the way they do hair and like other, um, ornaments of the people really like plays into that. They want you to know it's clay. Like they're
yeah.
genuinely happy using that as their format.
The character designs are very simplistic. They're almost like what you see in like Sunday comics
Mm-hmm.
often on how it's just like simple circles or maybe like simple claymation shapes. Once again, to I think so you focus a little bit on that these are handmade, but also it the simplicity adds some charm. I do want to talk about the humor as well that Aardman has. Aardman has a very specific humor that goes through. It's a super
Mm-hmm.
British humor. I
Very
think there's
British.
also a lot a lot of homages to classic cartoons,
Mm-hmm.
especially like Looney Tunes or some Hanna Barbera stuff. I find the quiet characters in this movie, the quiet characters, silent characters like the rabbits and Gromit, to be like a little Bugs Bunny-ish in their actions. And some of the
Mm-hmm.
bits I compared the female rabbit robot to attract the male straight up Bugs Bunny gag.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so as a classic cartoon nerd myself that didn't have friends as a 12-year-old because I was watching, Rocky and Bullwinkle and Looney Tunes and not uh, when I was a Nickelodeon, that's always kind of, I think, part of my connection to it because that's just a humor I've been able to relate to, but also, once again, nostalgic for it. Brings me back to my childhood when I grew up in the 1950s with Looney Tunes.
Mm-hmm. It is very British, and they really like to do the British thing where they build this intricate world that is utterly ridiculous at the same time. So they build this entire town around the idea that the vegetables are the most important thing. The most terrifying thing that could ever happen is having an animal who is interested in vegetables. This town would be legitimately less terrified of a giant animal who wanted to eat people because they care more about their vegetable contest than they care about like themselves.
Yeah.
And they play it so straight and serious, but it's also very funny because they commit to it and they build that world and they show you a sequence at the beginning where everyone's locking up their vegetables and talking to them and like praying over them, hoping that they'll be the best. And then even just the idea of having Wallace and Gromit be anti-pesto, like that is literally their job, is to put like garden gnomes out, which is again another very British symbol of having like a little garden gnome, and the garden gnome has like laser beams from its eyes, and it's the thing that gets tripped. And then they've got portraits relating to their customers, which again, very British thing. You see this a lot of British stuff is like portraits that matter, or even like this, it's like kind of ties in like a Harry Potterish thing, portraits that talk or related to something.
Yeah.
It's just like they're all very British symbols, and it's also like a very British dry humor, but also something that's in love with the ridiculousness of the world, but also wants to commit to that ridiculousness.
Yeah, there's nothing more British than small village quirks, and
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like the Nick Park stuff, especially because of this, and Shaun the Sheep, is all about that small village farm area kind of quirks, um, that I think becomes a theme through all their movies. And once again, having that quirk be pretty much the conflict of the movie is they need to protect their garden, connects to that simplicity I was talking about with the animation. Everything about this movie is not trying to be too complex without dumbing down, for kids. It's simple but still engaging and humorous. Um, it doesn't need to do too. It doesn't talk down to kids because you don't think you need extreme conflicts for them to be engaged or care. Like I feel like a lot of modern movies do.
Mhm.
You can care about a village trying to protect their big squashes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think also it always plays on that multiple levels. It's like a kid can watch this and just be like, oh, this is funny, this is cute. Oh, he's got a dog friend and they're catching bunnies and feeding the bunnies. Oh, he's getting stuck in the inventions. Like I think there's a lot of stuff that's played for kids, but then there's also like a lot of different layers of complexity. So like an adult can sit down and watch this movie and enjoy it on the level of a kid, but also see, oh, they really care about the details. There's a lot of jokes that are related to details that you wouldn't understand. Like there's a lot of like literature jokes and like culture jokes, but like more like related to history and like rather than like pop culture. So like this movie is kind of ageless because it's not trying to tie itself to the year it came out. It's just kind of trying itself to a general feel of like British society.
It's not even tied to a time period in the story. Like this, the
No,
story and the characters could exist at any time. They don't really hold it to a plate or a certain period.
they basically have a
It
car.
could be happening in the 40s. It could be happening now. You really can't tell.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then, so Aardman does a lot of work with Park, and Park does a lot of work with Wallace and Gromit. How do you feel about the characters of Wallace and Gromit? What's your connection to these people outside of maybe just this specific film?
As a cartoon nerd that I was talking about before, I definitely was researching the Hardman works now as a 16-year-old or teenager that had more accessibility to getting a hold of my own stuff. I think I never bought the DVDs, but I had some DVDs from the library of the Wallace and Gromit collections. So I definitely explored them around that time. I think they weren't as accessible to us when we were probably young or when I was younger. Um, so I didn't experience it as a little child, but definitely got into it. I was really into stop motion, and this is a big part of it. Um, so Wallace and Gromit, I think, in a way, kind of kept stop motion alive along with Aardman. I think having these lovely characters kept people's attention to it. And now we have all these studios trying to rejuvenate it as well, hopefully successfully, like or what Tim Burton does. But Wallace and Gromit have been like the figureheads of stop motion for what 2+ decades.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely remember Wrong Trousers and The Close Shave as a
Yeah.
kid. I remember watching those, I don't know, 10 to 12 range. So like,
Was
yeah, they're
Close Shave nominated for like an Oscar for Best Short, something like
I believe it may have won an Oscar for Best
that?
Short.
Okay.
That's potentially possible. But yeah, it's just they're just really enjoyable things to watch. And I think that in some ways, because they don't have some kind of greater conflict built into them, it makes it really easy to watch as a kid and just enjoy it. There's no stress to watching a Wallace and Gromit film, even like one that says The Curse of the Were Rabbit. Like with a lot of other studios, that title would lead to something that would potentially scare children, but it doesn't. It's just like it's the goal overall is just like good, enjoyable entertainment that I think personally, in the case of Curse of the Were Rabbit, ends up in creating like a really excellent film that will stand the test of time.
Yeah. There's a low key slapstick to a lot of their stuff, especially like the Shaun the Sheep works, but Wallace and Gromit as well. There's a lot of like was it Rube Goldberg machines? What is it called? The machines that like help make items work. Like you have this to do this to do this to make coffee. Um, there's a lot of those machines, which is not necessarily slapstick, but still a physical gag.
Mm.
Um, that like you said, that's so entertaining, kind of cool as a kid to watch that stuff happens without it being, too much or exaggerating any kind of violence. They keep the slapstick to a nice even level.
Yeah, so A Close Shave and The Wrong Trousers both won the animated
Yeah,
short film Oscar. So that's I think where the studio really got their start. And obviously, this film itself won the Oscar for Best Animated Feature because
The
it's
Wrong Trousers, the name of my autobiography.
is that because you just put on the wrong pants every morning?
Every goddamn morning. Sarah's pants, I guess.
Now we're getting to weird places. But yes, I do think one of the things that makes this movie so enjoyable is um, the inventions of Wallace. So Wallace is an inventor, and he's always creating inventions to like help him in his task. And these inventions are some of the most enjoyable sequences in the film because they're really detailed, they're really cool, and I think you watch them and you're like, that's awesome, and also I would like that. So the first invention you get introduced to in this film is the invention that wakes up Wallace. So it has a finger and it shoves the bottom of his bed to tell him to wake up. and then it, throws him into a chute and tries to put his clothes on and his slippers and get him ready for breakfast. And it's a really fun sequence. And then he goes on. There's other ones like I love the bunny vac. That the way that they catch the rabbits is not like running around with a net. It's that they take a vacuum cleaner and a tube, stick it in the ground, and suck them all up. And it's just like that's a really fun invention. And of course, the biggest one in this movie is the mind changer one, where they basically hook a bunch of rabbits up to Wallace, and he tells them that carrots are bad, with the goal of scaring them off vegetables because he hates vegetables. Of course, this backfires. He becomes the were-rabbit, and a rabbit becomes him. But these inventions are just, I think, wonderful sequences to watch.
And it is the using the power of animation because some of the inventions you can't really pull off in any kind of action movie. So, the movie we're going to talk about later this month, which I don't think uses the ability of animation to its fullest potential of being able to do some of these more exaggerated, stunts or props without it being too over the top. Because then there's like the giant hammer that does something to them. I don't remember it. There's just like a big hammer and it hits them out somewhere. Can you?
Yeah,
you have better memory than me.
He gets stuck in the pipe that's supposed to go to the dining room table.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Because he gets too fat. That's why he's on the diet. And the hammer has to come on and clunk him on top and drive him through the hole.
Yeah, so the point is that that's not something you could pull off in like a live action movie. They have it just exaggerated enough without it being dumb. So using the power of animation to make these ridiculous inventions, be enjoyable and be part of the world.
Absolutely. And I think part of it is also they're really detailed. Like they're very simplistic sometimes in the animation or in the character designs, but there are also a lot of details. There's a lot of jokes that are based on small details. Like one of my favorites is what I refer to as the cheese bookshelf. When he wants some cheese in the morning and he goes over to his bookshelf and all the cheeses are related to books. So basically you pull out the book that has some kind of cheese pun related classic literature title. I'm gonna have to look some of them up so we can talk about them in detail. But it's just that's a really cool detail, but also very British of being like, we're gonna have a sequence where he pulls out a bunch of like old literature books that happen to have cheese inside.
Yeah, when I was talking about simplistic animation or claymation, it's a lot more with the characters. The settings in general seem much more fussed over. They still seem, still have this handmade touch to them. They, don't look real. They look like a little handmade village you can put out, for Christmas. But they are beautiful. The gardens within this movie, some of the greenhouses are absolutely gorgeous and, intricate. And I think maybe having those next to these simplistic characters helps them stand out all the more impressive.
Oh, absolutely. So some of the things on the bookshelf are Bree Encounter, which is of course a play on Brief Encounter.
No, don't like it. Needs an F.
Swiss Cheese Family Robinson.
That one's good.
That's pretty decent. East of Edam.
No, that's bad.
How Green Was My Cheese.
Sure.
And then I think my personal favorite, Graded Expectations.
Oh, that's the best.
That's a pretty good one.
Except anything can be graded. It's not necessarily cheese.
That's true. That's true.
You can grade a potato. What if you open that, it's all potato pun and we got the whole jug wrong?
I mean, you could mix your potato and cheese. That's not
literally. Oh no, I was thinking How Green Is My Valley is Irish. I was like, literally Ireland. It's potatoes. Okay.
Absolutely. But yeah, the details. I think they just they really like. I think what's clear throughout the movie is they just enjoy the process of creating all this stuff, and I think that's why they like to do, all the fun detail. Like even when they're using the female rabbit to try to draw the were-rabbit in, a lot of that is about showing what Gromit has to do inside the van to make the female rabbit walk sexy. So they make like a joke. He's walking one way and it's not attractive. And then Wallace is like, then you have to walk sexy. And that's when he starts doing like the waltz, the sachet. And it's just like these moments, like figuring out like how you would use pedals and how you would use ropes to make a female rabbit do that. And like kind of show that process is, I think, what makes the movie really enjoyable is you get to see inside the characters' decisions and minds.
Yeah, that stuff is why I love stop motion. I think because it is so physical. I like seeing the work. I like thinking about how this gets done and just appreciating all the effort and thought that's put into it. It's amazing to me.
Absolutely. I think we would be foolish to not talk about how good some of the vocal performances in this film are. So This movie has the typical cast you would for a Wallace and Gromit film, which is Peter Sallis as Wallace, and Gromit, of course, is a nonverbal character. But this movie features Ray Fiennes as the hunter and Helena Bonham Carter as Wallace's sort of love interest, but also sort of involved Ray Fiennes. And I think, in particular, Helena Bonham Carter's vocal performance in this movie is just fantastic. I just think she is so much fun, and it sounds a little bit like her, but I think also that's one of the coolest things is she really commits to the character. So it's not like she's like, a lot of times you watch an animated movie and a lot of it is just like, hey, we hired a bunch of famous people to do voices because people like when they hear famous people that we can recognize voices. But I like the fact that these two are really, especially Fiennes, playing some characters. Like
Yeah,
you
you
don't
can't
necessarily recognize.
identify them anyways at
Yeah,
all.
absolutely.
They blend. They could be any other voice actor. They blend in with all the other mainstay Wallace and Gromit, voice actors as well. They fit in perfectly.
Yeah. I think that's really cool too, because it's just like I like when you can do an animated movie and you can get famous people who could be like, hey, my voice is the reason you hired me. Just let me do my own voice. I love the fact that they commit and just they build characters that not only work just as vocal performances, but also work really well when you can, put them together with the character designs that Aardman has created.
And with the Helena Bonham Carter character, that character could be nothing. Like it's the love interest of Wallace. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, yeah, partially her voice, I think adds so much charm and just like the right bit of humor, just like because she doesn't get like tons of real gags, but there's just a little bit of quirk in the way she delivers everything that makes the time she spends on screen
Mm-hmm.
humorous. And then like Ray Fiennes, gets to play the kind of arrogant and slightly sniveling asshole, which is like the Ray Fiennes type. And then you can pull it off with just his voice. He has that perfect, like a little too perfect of a British accent that makes it just seem somewhat sinister.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bonham Carter is just kind of like the perfect amount of like a little bit snooty, upper class, posh, out of touch, like British rich person. Like she always seems like a little bit like she doesn't understand what everybody else is going on, which is kind of a fun contrast with like the
Yeah.
down to earth villagers who are obsessed with their vegetable contest, and she's just kind of up there in the clouds, on her big rich castle and like, obsessed with like not hurting the animals in the way that the town folk don't understand because they live in very different worlds.
And it's almost one of those like naive, not hearing the animals. Like she wants them gone, but she, has the privilege to
Oh yeah.
act like she's doing the right thing, even though she doesn't deep down want to do the right thing.
Well, she
So
wants them
having
gone.
having her cake and eating them too.
She wants them gone as much as anybody else does, except she just has a crap load of money that she can throw at Andy Pesta to come vacuum them up and take them away. Versus like the town folk are just like, I don't really have the ability to do that. It's like and then they get, just they want the same thing, but they just have very different ways of going about it.
Yeah.
I know you wanted to talk about the rabbits in this film.
Yeah, so the rabbits, I think maybe could get a little more screen time because they are just like great slapsticky goofball things that is kind of just part of animation's history, having those type of characters. But I think if they overused it, they really miss them becoming the minions. Which I like the minions, but a lot of people are so annoyed by the constant slapstickiness kind of taking over, and they don't speak any gibberish. And I feel like the rabbits serve the same purpose. When they're on screen, they're kind of just like being goofballs and just doing like silly movements and stuff. But it's just there enough to be funny. And then, I mean, the best gag they were able to transform using the rabbit to um, be as Wallace, which is a super minions, you think. But because you can imagine them taking a minion and making it like Despicable Me or the whatever his name is, the Steve Carell
Gru.
character.
Gru.
Yeah, like Gru. Um, but for some reason, I think maybe because they didn't overuse it, that bit really gets sold and is so charming. They're my favorite characters, and I want them to be my buddies.
They
And
are pretty fantastic.
I would go visit a 20-foot statue of the rabbit from Chris the Were Rabbit.
They are pretty fantastic, and I love the rabbit that gets transformed into Wallace and just being like, and now there's a random rabbit who wants cheese and hates vegetables, and like, I'm gonna be inventing now, and they just do it really well, even though like it still sounds like the rabbit, but you can hear a little bit of Wallace coming through like that. The vocal performance then is really good. I think part of the reason they don't become the minions in this film is I don't think anyone for Aardman was sitting there during the making of this film going, "Hey, we could turn these guys into their own franchise." Like, I don't think that was. I think that's part of what makes the minions. And I kind of like the
It
minions. I
didn't
kind of enjoy
act
them.
like they were the best part of the movie. They let them like if they become the best part of the movie, they're great, but they're not forcing it or
Right,
they're
they're not
not
pushing them.
like they're pushing minions to be, the stand up.
Right, they wanted to make sure that after they made the first Despicable Me, that they had two franchises going forward. And Aardman is
Um,
not worried about even. I don't think even. I think that's also what's great about this movie is Aardman could have been sitting here going, "Hey, Wallace and Gromit are beloved characters. They've been here around since the late '80s, early '90s." They could have totally set this up to be like, "Let's make this the first of a bunch of them." And I think the awesome thing about this movie is they were just like, "No, we're gonna make one movie that's really good." And we're not even going to hint at a sequel. Like, there's no this movie never for a second even looks at a sequel, and I think
yeah.
that is kind of refreshing.
Instead, they focus on making two movies about silent farm animals, completely silent farm animal comedies that I think only me and you watch.
Uh yes, but I will say this as the official stance of our podcast. Please watch the Shaun the Sheep movies. They're delightful. They're wonderful.
Yeah, charming. Hey, it's like Theo's first movie. Do you know what happened? No. He was like a month.
All right. I think the final thing to talk about is that I think I guess I don't know. We've sort of touched on this already, but like I think it is really important to go back to the idea that the entire crux of this movie is um, we're going to use horror. That you do a lot of. It's hard
Do
to
you want
talk
me to
about.
explain this?
Yeah, you want me to explain that? No, go ahead.
You sound like me trying to do the plot summaries. So having for a second discussion of every show or third discussion if you count the intros, I wanted to really focus on some kind of central theme that we can connect all the movies to. So the last series we connected to Tom Hanks's career decade by decade, examining it through that one movie we discussed. And the connecting thing between the four movies I would say is how these animated movies really pay homage to classic monster and horror movies. So talking about some of the maybe themes they have in common with classic horror movies or some of the tropes they use as well. Um, so specifically for Shaun the Sheep, there's a lot of tropes that are similar to not just like monster movies, but also like body horror. There's some like body horror elements as well, as far as like transforming a rabbit is like transforming a werewolf, but same with like the fly or any other kind of creature feature of watching that transformation because you see Wallace transform into the rabbit. And I think that's some of the best animation in the movie. It's really stunning how they can make that work. And they make it the right level of like terrifying. It's still you're watching a human, transform into a beast and the hair grow out of their body, and otherwise they don't hide away that kind of scene is naturally scary while still, making it innocent enough for kids.
Mm-hmm. They also do a good job using horror shots and setups, but for comedy. Like the transformation scene is a really good example of this, where it's a funny sequence only because the end result of the transformation is a giant bunny rather than like a giant wolf or a giant monster. Like it is giant, but it's not necessarily scary because it's a rabbit. They also do this earlier in the film where they like a lot of the shots before they do a lot of the classic horror things you do when you have a monster but you haven't revealed the monster to your audience yet, where they do a lot of like in profile or monster POV shots, so you see the monster as they look at somebody else, or you see the result of what the monster has done but not the actual monster. Like this I think the creators of this movie really do like monster movies, like clearly because they added some very specific tropes, very specific shots into them with the goal of being like, hey, look, we're going to take something and just kind of twist it around so it's not as scary, it's not traumatic in the same way an actual monster would be, but we're just going to use it for comedy. And I think that's what hopefully a lot of these Halloween movies can do, is just kind of take what the original horror monster stuff would have done, but then also play it in a way that's like enjoyable and interesting for kids.
That's why I'm so interested in this theme and wanted to do this month because how the horror genre is something so naturally dark and something naturally more mature in a way, that the way that you could adapt it to make it entertaining for kids, almost like a gateway drug to, you know, being a dark, fucked up person, or these Halloween kids movies, and it's always kind of drawn me, or some of my favorite anime movies. I do want to also point out another trope that is used. I think I don't want to be proven wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's in every single one of the movies we're gonna watch. I'm three movies of our five, and it is in all three, which is the angry mob. The fact that a classic monster movie theme is that the monster is the misunderstood one, and the true monsters are us. Okay,
Hmm.
us that are acting out in fear, going out with torches and things. The villagers do start wanting to act out against the Wallace, the rare rabbit, when I'm hunted down because they start to be scared for their own lives or their own vegetables' lives in this case. Um, that you start to act irrationally when you don't
Hmm.
understand things, and that I think maybe because that's a very easy theme for kids to understand, it is very prevalent in these kids' Halloween movies.
Which is the classic monster trope of the audience is the only people who get to see both sides. We get to see the fear of the audience and the fear of the individual that's undergoing the transformation. So in some ways, the audience isn't the mob isn't even acting in some ways irrationally. They're only going off what they know. But what makes it an interesting thing to watch is that we do know they're acting irrationally because the monster isn't necessarily as evil or as terrible as they think he is.
This is the much more toned down mob of all the ones that we're gonna end
Yeah,
up
it's pretty
seeing,
goofy.
and I think that once again is just similar to how Aardman runs its productions. Like it's not going to be over the top. It's the angry mob is angry because their vegetables will be taken over, and they're not really out with like torches trying to burn down the whole village in fear.
Yeah, they even do like jokes of like, oh, angry mob supplies. Like somebody turns their booth into angry mob supplies when it happens. Just because like, it plays in the trope, but also using the classic Aardman of like
Yeah,
poking fun at the idea that people would act like this just because they saw something.
I one of the other tropes they use I find is very smartly done is the priest character.
Mhm.
He is the harbinger of doom. I feel like the classic monster or horror movie character is the Christian symbol that's coming saying you're all gonna die. That's coming for you, and they pull that. The moments that the character gets to do that are, as you were talking about the shots, is shot in a similar way to make it seem a little more tense and scary. But then it gets completely contradicted by him doing something goofy or getting excited about vegetables because he loves the vegetables as much as everybody else. Um, I really enjoy how those characters are used, and I feel like it could have been done annoying.
Yeah, I think it's like a classic horror trope of like there's the always the performative character who's like, this is always going to go poorly. And they're always like a little over exaggerated and a little big and a little bit like showy and like, oh my god, we're all gonna get destroyed. This is the
It's
harbinger of doom.
often tied to religion, maybe because that's like the trustworthy person of the culture
Yeah.
of these small villages, especially that when the leader of your community or of your religious community is coming saying, beware of what's coming, it creates this makes the threat real for the other characters
And this
involved.
character also gets to do the classic monster movie thing, which is where they open the big book and they go, "This is the tale of the were rabbit," and it talks about like, "Oh, the were rabbit lives within all of us," like stuff like that. And then like, how do you kill with a were rabbit? You need a gold bullet and like stuff like that. That's kind of a classic of monster movies. Is the explanation of the history of the monster
Yeah.
and the this is how you get rid of it. Because one thing that happens in all monster movies is there's never just you can't just kill it like you would kill a person. It always requires some kind of special mode of elimination.
Yeah, and the special mode of elimination is the love in our hearts.
Absolutely.
That's how I get rid of all the monsters.
Any more thoughts on these connection to monster and horror tropes?
Not except I'm really excited because as a person who's not much of a horror movie fan, not out of me being a scaredy cat, I'm brave. I'm an adult. Don't judge me. I just am often not that interested in the stories that horror movies have. Now, there's a lot that are the exceptions, but for some reason, the kids' movies, I think, because they combine with, especially the stop motion with an animation that I'm very interested in, I love, but also tend to be a little more humorous that's able for me to be engaged in. That these tend to be how I like to spend my Halloween. And
Hmm.
that's why I want to spend my Halloween with you talking about a bunch of these great, cartoon monster movies.
Absolutely. And I think I'm
For Frankenweenie. That's all I'm saying.
I think I'm slightly more of a horror fan than you are, so I think that is like a small separation. Um, but I don't think either of us are definitely not hardcore horror fans. I also do love these movies. Like Wallace and Gromit is one of my favorite Halloween movies, just because it's so much fun to watch around Halloween in a way that's also just really enjoyable and not potentially like. So there's some great horror movies that I love that are also really stressful to watch. And the wonderful thing about Wallace and Gromit is you get the same level of quality, but you don't get to the end of it and feel like you've had a panic attack or feel like you've been dragged through a really tough experience. And I think that's what makes movies like this so enjoyable is they touch on the tropes, but they let you do it in a way that's more enjoyable and doesn't require you feeling like crap for several hours after.
Yeah, the fact that Halloween has become a time for people to watch like slasher movies is bewildering to me. To me, slasher serial killer movies have nothing to do with what Halloween has as its heart, which is more of this like magical spookiness and kind of a friendly spookiness. Because we really come to know Halloween, as children, our experiences as children, trick or treating, seeing people in costume.
Absolutely.
Whenever adults decide I still want to like Halloween, so I'm going to make it about murder, is nonsense. It's really is more like of a magic thing. Like to me, Harry Potter is Halloween movies. I think it's so. I think that's another reason why we're drawn to because I keep the spirit of Halloween in my heart in more of an innocent way rather than wanting to watch a bunch of teens get murdered after fucking.
And I watch John Carpenter's Halloween every 31st. So little difference there. But I think this was a really fun discussion of a really fun film. Definitely check out Curse of the Were-Rabbit if you have not already. You probably should have before you watched this episode. Otherwise, I think you would have been very confused and potentially spoiled. But why I think it's always important to say, why would you listen to a podcast about a movie that you haven't seen?
Because they
Because
love us. No, don't listen to them. You can watch a movie, or watch a podcast. You don't watch a movie. We're better than watching a movie. Yeah, I gave the plot summary. It was wonderful. You know what happens.
that's true.
This is better. You don't need to watch movies. Just listen to podcasts.
All right. And with that, thank you, Zach. And I hope you guys join us next week when we talk and continue our discussion of animated Halloween movies with a discussion of Paranorman. So we will see you then.